Are you a real human person? Do you have bones, maybe even muscles? And are you a victim of the endless march of time that comes for all of us? Then you should try strength training.
Alright, let's be serious now. I'm not going to make this into an advertisement as to why you should be doing strength training. If you're watching this video, you probably already are. So I'm just going to focus on the structure of my training. I will say that my reasons for doing strength work are very clear. I am 31, I'm going to be 32 this year, and I've been blessed with female physiology. The perimenopause typically begins somewhere in your mid-40s for most people, but it can start to happen sooner than that. When that does start to happen, I will experience a relative decline in my strength and my bone density. If my bone density decreases too much with age, I'll start to experience a greater risk of fractures and breaks. If my tendons weaken too much, then the impact on my mobility will be significant, and if my overall strength decreases too much, then not only will it impact my running economy and my running form, but it will also make day-to-day tasks harder. The process will initially happen fairly slowly, but it will speed up over time. But I can reduce the rate of decline by making use of a couple of strength training sessions a week that are specifically targeting the lower body. The structure of the work goes as follows. I do some sort of mobility little and often, so something every day, and often as a warm-up for my strength sessions. Plyometric work to keep a good level of tendon stiffness and reactive force production. Heavy bilateral compound movements at a high intensity but a low volume for bone density, peak strength development, and force production. Unilateral compound movements to help with any imbalances or specific weaknesses. Unilateral and bilateral isolation exercises to help zone in on areas that just need a bit more strength development. For runners, this is often going to be calf related work because the calves usually aren't strong enough and they're a relatively easy one to get stronger. This is the structure of every single lower body strength training session I do throughout the year. It rarely differs from this. Sometimes I will fit in a bit of core work at the end of the workout if I have time. If I don't, then I just put the core work in 10 to 15 minute chunks elsewhere in the week. At the moment, the first session of the week is on a Tuesday morning.
We start off every strength workout with some mobility work. Here, I'm just picking a selection of movements that get the hips, knees, and ankles moving around a little bit and prepared for what else I'm about to do. Once I'm happy that my various joints and things are all nice and warmed up, then I move on to doing some plyometric work. We start off with a higher volume of lower intensity plyometric work to make sure the tendons in the lower leg are nice and warmed up, do some double leg and some single leg stuff, and then we move on to the slightly higher intensity stuff. So here, for example, I'm doing depth drops. These are a higher intensity, so I do a much lower volume of them and then move on to a little bit of single leg higher intensity stuff. I then progress on to the first heavy bilateral movement of this workout, which is a box squat. You don't have to do these as box squats, but I am currently choosing to do them as box squats at the moment because I just really want to focus on trying to get as much force production and stimulus through the movement rather than worrying too much about how far I'm pushing my range of motion. Just want to focus on trying to move as much weight as possible, basically. I have chosen to throw in some front squats. And these I do try and push the range of motion as much as possible. I do feel it is important to have some movements where you're trying to go full range of motion, but it's not really something that's absolutely necessary for running faster. This is more for general health and long-term movement mobility. My single leg compound movement for this workout is a single leg deadlift, and I am experimenting with these a little bit. They're starting to get too heavy for me to do them how you'd ordinarily do these with a barbell. So I was playing around with trying to do them one-handed, and I think maybe I'm just going to use a dumbbell next time. It's probably going to be easier to balance. And then we move on to doing some calf raises. I am trying to make these relatively heavy, and I'm doing these single-legged ones as straight-legged calf raises in this workout. And then moving on to resisted hip flexion, which is just to target my hip flexor area and make sure that bit is strong enough. I'll finish off the Tuesday workout with just some very, very heavy soleus calf raises done bilaterally on the leg press.
Alright, we've taken a look at my first lower body session of the week, so we're just going to move on and look at the second one, just covering the stuff that's different. So I'm not going to go back over the lower intensity plyometric stuff.
I like to do some kind of hurdle movement in my strength training. So this is a broad jump into hurdle. And then once I've done those, we move on to some trap bar deadlifts. Now, for similar reasons to doing the box squat, don't need a crazy range of motion, just want to move as much weight as possible. And then my kind of bigger range of motion movement for this workout is doing deficit Romanian deadlifts. Yeah, big range of motion gets me a lot of activation through the glutes and the hamstrings. And I do find this movement has, I feel, helped me with improving my uphill running strength. The single leg calf raise we're using for this workout is a soleus calf raise, and then I move on to some lateral step ups, which I have in the workout at the minute because I've been having some specific issues with one of my hips, just some like muscular niggles. So I've thrown this in there just to try and make sure I'm developing a bit of more specific strength around that area and make sure it's not going to cause me any additional problems. On this particular day, the leg press was busy when I wanted to use it, so I did my calf raises on the pendulum squat, which was a deeply unpleasant experience.
And that's the lot. Things will change slightly as I get closer to the half marathon. I'll continue to cut out volume, so my heavy bilateral stuff will go down to 2 rep sets, and then actually in the immediate run up to the half marathon I'll just be doing 1 rep sets for the really heavy stuff. At that point all I want to be doing is just keeping the strength there and present and keeping some of the stimulus there. At that point I'm not going to be trying to develop anything. And that's generally how I periodize towards goal races. Slightly higher volume earlier on in the training block, and then as the actual goal gets closer, I cut out the volume, up the intensity. And that works nicely alongside trying to run 100 kilometers a week. All right, enough rambling from me. I have a race later this week, so the next video will hopefully, providing the weather doesn't do something very strange, be a race video for Skegness 10K. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.